Have you ever looked at two plants side by side, one just, thriving, and the other, well, struggling, wilting, maybe yellowing? Ever wonder what's really going on? Today we're doing a deep dive into that hidden world, the world of plant diseases. We want to give you a kind of shortcut to getting informed. Think of it like learning the basic language, the key vocabulary of plant pathology.
Yeah, and it's really more than just jargon. The idea here, our mission for you listening, is to gain a better lens, to really decode these like biological battles happening all around us, understanding the vulnerabilities in our environment, from just one sick leaf in your house to huge agricultural problems.
Okay, so let's unpack that. First step, maybe drawing a clear line between a plant disease and what we call a disorder. A disease, as you said, involves some malfunction in the plant cells or tissues. It's caused by this continuous irritation, right? Often from a pathogen, maybe an environmental factor, and you see symptoms.
Exactly. The key is that a disease usually implies an active, often biological culprit. A disorder, on the other hand, that's non-infectious. Think poor soil, not enough nutrients, maybe drought stress. Crucially, a disorder can't spread from one plant to another.
Right, that distinction is fundamental. So if there is an active agent, we're usually talking about a pathogen. That's the thing, often a microorganism that actually causes the disease.
And sometimes that pathogen lives on and needs the living plant for its food. That specific type we call a parasite.
Okay, pathogen causes disease, parasite lives on the host. Now, you mentioned the pathogen's ability versus the process. Can you elaborate?
Sure. So pathogenicity. That's basically the inherent capacity of a pathogen to cause disease. Just its potential, you could say. But pathogenesis, yeah, that's the whole story. It's the entire chain of events, like step by step, from the moment the pathogen makes contact all the way through to the disease developing fully.
Got it. One's the potential, the other's the actual unfolding drama. So how do we, see this happening? How do we diagnose? We look for signs and symptoms, right?
Precisely. A sign is when you can actually see the pathogen itself or its products. Like visible fungal threads, maybe some spores, bacterial ooze.
Okay, so that's the actual culprit making an appearance.
Right. Whereas a symptom is the plant's reaction to being infected. That's the wilting, the yellowing, those spots on the leaves, maybe galls.
And when you see a whole collection of these symptoms together.
That pattern, that collection, we call a syndrome. It's a really important clue for figuring out what's wrong.
Interesting. It's like reading the plant's response. And the ways pathogens feed are also quite distinct, aren't they? You mentioned biotrophs.
Yeah, biotrophs are fascinating. They can only survive on living host tissue. They need the plant alive to feed. Think of rust fungi or powdery mildews. Very specialized.
Okay, so they keep their host alive. What about the opposite?
Well, then you have the necrotrophs. These are more aggressive, you could say. They kill the host tissue. First, they secrete toxins or enzymes, and then they feed on the dead stuff. Sclerotium ralphii is a good example.
Kill first, eat later.
Pretty much. And then there's a middle ground, the hemibiotrophs. They're kind of cunning. They start out like biotrophs, living on live tissue for a bit, but then they switch tactics and become necrotrophs, feeding on the tissue after it dies.
Wow, quite the range of strategies. Understanding that helps make sense of the infection process itself, I guess. It starts with inoculum.
That's right. Inoculum is just the part of the pathogen that actually initiates the infection. It could be spores, fragments of fungal hyphae, bacterial cells, virus particles.
The infectious bit. And inoculum potential.
That's a measure of how likely that inoculum is to actually succeed. It considers, the amount of inoculum present, its viability, its aggressiveness, and how favorable the environment is for infection. It's not just if it's there, but how much punch it packs.
Okay, so the pathogen arrives. Then what? There's a delay sometimes.
Yes, that's the incubation period. It's the time between the actual infection, the pathogen getting established, and when you first see visible symptoms. It can be hours, days, sometimes even weeks or months.
And some plants are just more vulnerable than others to begin with.
Absolutely. That's predisposition. Things like poor nutrition, water stress, wounding, even genetic makeup can make a plant more susceptible to attack before the pathogen even arrives.
Makes sense. But plants fight back, don't they? I've heard of hypersensitivity.
Oh, definitely. Hypersensitivity is a key defense. It's like a scorched earth tactic. The plant cells right around the infection site rapidly die to basically wall off the pathogen and prevent it from spreading further. Pretty dramatic.
Wow. Okay, so if the pathogen gets past the defenses and sets up shop, that's infection.
That's infection. When it successfully enters, establishes itself, and starts drawing nutrients.
And if it doesn't, just stay in one spot.
If it moves throughout the plant's vascular system, for instance, spreading widely, that's a systemic infection.
Which brings us to thinking about disease not just in one plant, but in whole populations, like epidemics.
Exactly. An epidemic, or the plant term is often epiphytotic, is when a disease spreads widely and causes significant damage within a plant population over a particular time. The classic tragic example is the late blight of potato epidemic in Ireland in the 1840s, a devastating impact.
A stark reminder. But not all diseases explode like that, right? Some are just always around.
Correct. When a disease is more or less constantly present in a particular geographic area or population, maybe at low levels, we call that endemic. Like clubroot of cabbage is endemic to the Nilgiris region in India. It's just part of the landscape.
Okay, so epidemic is widespread outbreak, endemic is constantly present. What about diseases that just pop up now and then?
Those are sporadic. They
Oh,
occur
yeah.
irregularly, infrequently, maybe only when very specific environmental conditions align. The Udbata disease of rice, as an example, doesn't happen often, but it can show up.
Okay, wow. That's a lot of useful terms. So bringing it back to our listener, what does knowing all this mean practically? It feels like having this vocabulary gives you a much sharper lens, doesn't it, for understanding everything from why maybe one sunflower is drooping to reading about major crop failures.
Absolutely, it empowers you. Suddenly, reports about agriculture or news about blight make more sense. You can better appreciate the incredibly complex biological fights happening in your own garden, on farms, and out in nature. It's a way to decode what's happening.
So here's something to think about. The next time you see a plant that just doesn't look right, or you hear about challenges to our food supply, how might understanding these terms, pathogens, symptom, epidemic, endemic, change not just how you diagnose that plant, but how you grasp the much bigger picture, the historical echoes, the global impacts of these tiny battles? What might you notice differently now?